On a mild, golden afternoon, the kind that made even the busiest streets pause under the warmth, Delphine's bakery glowed like a little haven on Riverside Avenue. Sunlight poured through its front windows, glinting off display cases filled with pastries polished to perfection. The air inside was a blend of butter and sugar and something softer still, the comfort people sought without realizing it. But at the doorway stood someone who didn't come for comfort. A thin, wind-worn woman hovered at the threshold, trying to look smaller than she already was. Her name was Marissa Hale. Her clothes were the kind that told a story without needing a single word. Fabric stretched thin by too many washings, hems frayed, patches clinging to elbows and knees. Dust marked her sleeves. Her shoes looked like they'd seen more roads than rest. Next to her stood a little girl, about 7, clutching her mother's hand like it was the last anchor she had in the world. Her name was Flora. Her eyes were enormous, not just naturally, but in the way hunger makes a child's gaze grow too wide, too aware. Yet there was still a thin strand of light in them, some small, stubborn hope that refused to die. To Marissa, the bakery felt too bright, too clean, too beautiful, too far from the life she'd been living. Every tray of croissants, every intricately frosted cupcake, every loaf with its perfect sheen only reminded her of everything Flora had gone without. They hadn't eaten since the day before. Flora's dinner had been half an overripe apple, the other half saved for Marissa. She had told her daughter, "You take the bigger piece, sweetheart." Flora, without hesitation, had broken the apple unevenly in favor of her mother instead. And it was that memory, that quiet, desperate generosity, that pushed Marissa to step inside the bakery now. Flora's hand tightened around her fingers, and Marissa tried to steady her breath. She wasn't here to buy anything. She didn't even have the coins for a bus ride home. She was here to beg. The door chimed softly as they entered. A few customers glanced their way before looking quickly back at their coffees, their pastries, their comfortable routines. Marissa kept her head lowered, praying no one would recognize pity flickering in their eyes. A young employee behind the counter paused mid-sentence when he saw her. His polite smile faltered, not out of cruelty, but surprise. People like Marissa didn't usually step into places like this. The bakery was the kind of shop where customers wore smart coats and carried leather purses, where patrons picked up special order cakes for birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, not for survival. Marissa walked toward the counter carefully, as though each step might crack the tiled floor. Flora followed silently, her stomach growling just loud enough that Marissa winced. The employee forced a polite tone. "Hello? Can I help you?" Marissa's throat tightened. How could she explain without drowning in the shame of it? She cleared her throat, voice thin as thread. I was wondering if you had anything that you, well, don't sell? Maybe something from yesterday, something that's no longer fresh, a cake that needs to be thrown out?" The employee blinked, startled. He glanced over his shoulder. Another worker pretended not to listen, but her hand paused mid-wipe across the counter. Marissa continued, her cheeks burning. "It's for my daughter. She hasn't had anything sweet in a long time. We're not asking for anything big, just something that was going to be thrown away anyway." Flora pressed into her mother's side, embarrassed and hopeful at the same time. For a moment, no one spoke. But someone had heard. At the far end of the bakery, sitting alone at a corner table, a tall man in a soft charcoal gray suit watched with quiet intensity. His posture was relaxed, almost deceptively so, but his eyes were sharp, observant in a way that suggested he had spent years paying attention to details that others overlooked. His name was Roland Vance, a man whose signature could build towers or fund entire hospitals, a man people recognized from business magazines and billboards, a man whose wealth could be measured not just in dollars, but in influence. But today, Roland didn't look like the titan who dominated boardrooms. His jacket was unbuttoned, tie loose, sleeves pushed to his forearms. He held a half-finished cup of coffee and an untouched slice of blueberry pie. He had come here for silence, for a small moment of peace between meetings, for a taste of something ordinary in a life that was anything but ordinary. Yet when Marissa stepped into the bakery, his solitude shifted into something else, something heavier, something rooted in memories he didn't often allow himself to revisit. He watched the scene unfold, not with judgment, but with an uneasy ache under his ribs. The employee finally stammered, we don't usually, the policy is we can't really give away expired. Marissa nodded quickly, swallowing her disappointment. Of course, I understand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. She turned, ready to leave, ready to take her daughter back into the heat and the uncertainty and the hungry silence of their day. But Flora tugged desperately on her sleeve. Mommy, please. I'm not mad. It's okay. We can try somewhere else. Marissa tried to smile at her daughter, but the expression was cracked at the edges. Across the room, Roland felt something tighten in his chest. Maybe it was the rawness in the mother's voice. Maybe it was the child's quiet acceptance. Or maybe it was the fact that once, a long time ago, he too had stood in a shop with empty pockets and a hunger that went deeper than food. He set his coffee down gently, as though any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment. Then he stood, and while the employees watched in confusion, Roland Vance, the man whose signature could build towers or fund entire hospitals, walked toward the woman who expected absolutely nothing from him. He stopped a respectful distance away, lowering his voice so only she and her daughter could hear. Excuse me, but I believe you deserve something much better than expired cake. Marissa froze. Flora's eyes widened. Roland offered a warm, steady smile, the kind that felt like safety. If you'll allow me, he continued, I'd like to buy your daughter the finest cake in this bakery, and perhaps a meal for you both as well. His tone held no pity, only sincerity. And what Marissa didn't know, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that this simple act was only the beginning, because Roland Vance wasn't just offering kindness. He had plans. Very different plans.
Marissa didn't move. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink the words the man had. Just spoken hung in the air like something impossible. Buy her daughter the finest cake in the bakery? People didn't say things like that to her, not in years. Not since her life had unraveled piece by piece. First the job, then the apartment, then her health, and finally the last threads of dignity she kept tying together every day just to keep going. But this stranger, this sharply dressed man, with eyes too kind for someone who looked so powerful, he had just offered the very thing she'd been begging for. Yet instead of joy, shame hit her first. She straightened quickly, stepping in front of her daughter as if protecting her from kindness was easier than accepting it. No, sir, please, she stammered. You don't need to do that. We'll be fine. Really, we're used to you shouldn't be used to hardship, the man said gently. Cutting through her words without raising his voice, he wasn't smiling out of amusement. He wasn't forcing help. He wasn't performing generosity for an audience. His expression held something rare, respect. Marissa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her throat tightened, her cheeks flushed. She found herself staring at the floor because looking him in the eye felt too vulnerable. Flora, however, wasn't nearly as guarded. Her wide eyes flickered between the towering man and the rows of beautiful cakes behind the glass. She tugged lightly at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, is it okay? The question shattered what was left of Marissa's resistance. She let out a long breath, the kind that carried exhaustion far older than she looked, and finally nodded. If you're sure, she whispered. Thank you, truly. Roland's expression softened. I'm very sure. Wait here. He turned toward the register, and everything in the bakery shifted. Employees straightened. Customers pretended they weren't watching, though every eye discreetly followed him. One barista whispered, "Is that?" Another murmured, "It is." That's Roland Vance. But Roland didn't acknowledge the sudden murmurs. He walked to the counter with calm, deliberate steps, and gestured for the pastry chef on duty, a young woman named Lily, with flour dusting her forearms, to come forward. What's the best cake you have today? He asked. Lily blinked, startled by the presence of the man, whose company logo she'd seen on billboards. Well, sir, the strawberry chantilly cake is our specialty. Fresh cream, real berries. People drive across town for it. Good, Roland said. I'll take the entire cake. To full. Meals from your lunch menu? Whatever is ready soonest. The young cashier nodded rapidly. Of course, right away. And one more thing, Roland added, lowering his voice just enough to convey seriousness. He glanced toward Marissa and Flora. Please treat them like your most important customers today. Lily swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Back, Marissa stood frozen, the weight of the room suddenly on her shoulders. She knew people were watching. She felt the heat of their stares. But, for the first time in a long while, they weren't looking at her with disgust or discomfort. They were looking at her, with curiosity, with caution, maybe even sympathy. But before she could get overwhelmed, Flora whispered, Mommy, look. The little girl pointed to where Roland was now walking, toward them again, this time carrying a delicate white pastry box and two warm take-out bags that smelled like heaven to a starving child. He stopped in front of them. These are for you, he said simply, a meal for both of you. And dessert. Maurice's hands trembled as she reached for the bags, her voice small. Sir, I don't have words. This is more than we deserve. Roland shook his head gently. Everyone deserves to eat, he said. Everyone deserves sweetness, especially children. Flora hugged the cake box to her chest like it was treasure. But Roland wasn't done. He knelt, kneeling in front of a little girl in a crowded bakery with the humility of a man who understood something deeper than wealth, and said, Flora, right, your mom told the cashier your name. Flora nodded shyly. Yes, mister. Well, Flora, I want you to know something important. His voice lowered, calm and warm. You are allowed to wish for lovely things. You deserve them. Never forget that. Flora stared at him, her eyes welling. No one outside her mother had ever told her she deserved anything lovely. You sound like my mommy, she whispered. She always says I should dream big. Roland smiled slowly. And she's a very wise woman. Maurice's breath hitched, a flush rising to her cheeks at the quiet compliment. But something inside her tightened at the same time. Kindness like this always came with strings in her world. Nothing this generous was free. Nothing this easy was safe. She forced herself to ask, Sir, why are you helping us? You don't even know our names. Roland rose to his feet, brushing off his knees before meeting her eyes with a calm, unwavering glance. I help when I can, he said simply, and today I can. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But trust was a luxury she rarely afforded these days still. She murmured, Thank you, truly. She moved to leave. She didn't want to overstay, didn't want to take more space than she felt she deserved. But before she could reach the door, Roland stepped forward. Wait, please. Marissa paused. Roland hesitated for half a second. Choosing his words carefully, I'd like to offer you something else, if you're open to it. Marissa tightened her grip on the cake box. Her body stiffened. What? What kind of offer? She whispered. Roland's jaw tensed. Not from impatience, from something closer to concern. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek silver business card, and held it out without stepping closer, giving her the choice to take it or not. Before you say no, hear me out, he said softly. I own several community programs, shelters, job training, centers, medical support networks. And his voice dropped to something heavy. A hospitality foundation on the west side, safe place for families, especially single mothers who need temporary support. He looked at Flora for just a moment, not long enough to make it uncomfortable, but long enough that the girl felt seen. It's clean, he added. It's safe. And it's not charity. It's a resource. Marissa stared at the card as though it were made of fire. She didn't take it. She didn't step back. Either, Roland continued, his tone patient. If you ever need help, a place to sleep, warm meals, connection to jobs, call the number on that card. Any day, any hour. Marissa swallowed hard. I don't want to take advantage of anything. We'll get back on our feet. You're not taking advantage, Roland said quietly. You're surviving. His words sank into her like warmth she didn't know how to hold. She finally took the card, fingers trembling. Flora squeezed her hand. Mommy, is he an angel? Roland chuckled softly. No, little one, far from it. He almost added, I'm just a man who knows what hunger feels like. But he didn't. Some truths stay buried. Marissa lifted her daughter's hand and whispered to her, Say thank you, baby. Flora turned to Roland, her smile small and grateful. Thank you, mister. I'll remember this forever, Roland felt. Something shift inside him at those words, something he hadn't felt in years, and as Marissa opened the bakery door to leave, Roland's gaze followed her with an intensity that surprised him because something about this woman, her dignity, her strength, her desperation mixed with pride, stirred a memory he had spent a decade trying to forget, and he didn't know yet that fate had just bound them together, or that helping them once would not be enough. He would cross paths with them again, not by accident, but because he had plans had not yet revealed, plans that would change all three of their lives, and for some people in the city, those plans were very, very inconvenient. The late afternoon sun had faded by the time Marissa and Flora stepped out of the bakery. The sky was dipping into soft purples, the street lamps flickering to life one by one. Flora clutched the cake box tightly with both hands, as if afraid it might vanish if she blinked. Marissa held the warm takeout bags against her chest, the heat seeping through her thin sweater like a forgotten comfort. But even as they walked, she kept glancing over her shoulder. Roland was still inside, still watching them, not in a predatory way. Not in a suspicious way, but with a kind of solemn concern she didn't know how to process. Marissa hurried her steps. Flora, being a child, noticed everything. Mommy, she whispered, why did he look so sad? Marissa's breath caught. I don't know, honey. Do you think he's lonely? Marissa slowed her steps in her world. Loneliness was something that belonged to people like her, those who lived on the outskirts of comfort. But Roland, a millionaire, a man who probably had everything? People like him didn't get lonely, right? She forced a smile. Maybe he just had a long day. Flora nodded, satisfied. Children accepted simple answers even when adults couldn't. Walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, the long way, because Marissa didn't want to risk people crowding too close to Flora's cake. She kept checking the lid like she expected it to disappear. But on the bus, people didn't look at the cake. They looked at her. Her dirty jeans, her frayed coat, her shoes with the sole coming loose, her daughter's oversized hand-me-down jacket. The stares always came, and the worst ones weren't cruel. They were pitying. Marissa hated pity more than hunger. She sat stiffly, turning their bodies away from curious eyes, whispering comfort into Flora's hair until the bus reached their neighborhood. Neighborhood the city often forgot existed. Their building was old enough to groan when the wind blew. The hallway lights flickered. The elevator hadn't worked in 3 years. The smell, a mix of old carpet and leaking pipes, clung to everything. But when they entered their tiny basement studio, Flora's face lit up like they had walked into a palace. Because home wasn't about looks. It was about love. And their home overflowed with that, even on empty stomachs. Mommy, Flora whispered, can we open it now? Marissa nodded. The little girl placed the cake box on their rickety table, lifting the lid with a reverence usually reserved for miracles. Inside was the bakery's strawberry chantilly cake, layers of sponge, real cream, berries that glistened like rubies. A cake fit for a celebration, not for a struggling child who hadn't had dessert in months. Marissa's heart squeezed. She cut a small slice for Flora and hesitated. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, but Flora held out her plate. Mommy, share with me. Marissa's throat tightened. Her daughter, her sweet little girl, even now, with hunger gnawing at her, still offered to share. No, baby, she whispered, stroking her hair. This is all for you. But I don't want it if you don't have some too. Marissa blinked fast. the tears coming to icily these days. Okay, she whispered, taking a small forkful. Just a taste. Flora devoured her slice with the joy only a child can. Have, she giggled, cream on her lips, her eyes bright again. Marissa watched her, and for a moment, the world was perfect. A moment she wanted to freeze, a moment she knew wouldn't last. After dinner, long after Flora had fallen asleep on their worn couch, Marissa sat alone at the table. Staring at the silver business card Roland had given her, it gleamed faintly under the single bulb hanging overhead. Roland Vance. Contact. Private line. Vance Hospitality Foundation. West Side. World away from hers. Her fingers hovered over the card. Call it, don't call it. He said it wasn't charity. He said it was a resource. He said it was safe. She didn't believe in safe. Not anymore. Every time she reached out for help in her past, something had been taken from her. Trust, dignity, stability, everything. What if going there meant losing even more? What if it wasn't what he said? What if people like him didn't give freely without wanting something back? And yet, she looked at Flora sleeping. The blanket slipping from a thin shoulder. Winter was coming. Rent was due. Food was scarce. Her job hours had been cut. Her body felt one illness away from collapse. Maybe, just maybe, this man had been sincere. Maybe. This was the lifeline she'd prayed for when she had nothing left. But fear won. She slid the card under a stack of newspapers, wiped her eyes, and whispered to herself, "No, we'll figure something out. We always do." Across town, Roland sat in his penthouse office long after everyone else had left. He wasn't working. He couldn't. His mind was replaying the scene from the bakery, Marissa's trembling voice, Flora's wide, hopeful eyes, the quiet desperation that clung to them like a shadow. He had seen desperation before. He knew it intimately, too. Intimately, he poured himself a glass of water and downed it, trying to steady his thoughts. But the memory of something long buried clawed back to the surface. A woman, a child, a winter night, far colder than this. He squeezed his eyes shut. Not now, not tonight. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Reminder, board meeting tomorrow. Investors want the new partnership announcement. He tossed the phone aside. Tomorrow, he would return to being Roland Vance, the unshakable businessman. The strategic negotiator. The man who didn't bend or break. But tonight, he was the man who had watched a hungry child cling to a cake like it was magic. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Damn it. He grabbed his coat. He wasn't done yet. The next morning, Marissa woke to the sound of heavy knocking. Not the gentle knock of a neighbor. A firm, authoritative knock. Her blood froze. She tucked Flora behind her, approached the door cautiously, and peeked through the cracked peephole. Two men stood outside. Not police, not lords. Men in sleek suits. Men who didn't belong anywhere near her building. Her heart slammed against her ribs. One of them raised a hand and knocked again. Harder, miss. Marissa Hale, the man called out. We need to speak with you. It's urgent, Flora whispered, trembling. Mommy, who are they? Marissa didn't answer because she didn't know, and she had a sinking feeling, a terrible, gut-wrenching feeling, that this had something to do with Roland Vance. But why? What did he want? What had she gotten herself into? Her fingers tightened. Around the doorknob, whatever waited on the other side was not going away. Not this time.
The knocking didn't stop. Every strike against the door sent a tremor through Marissa's bones. She had lived through eviction notices, angry landlords, judgmental social workers, and the heavy silence of people who pretended not to hear her knocking when she needed help. But this felt different. This felt dangerous. Mommy, Flora whispered, clinging to the hem of her sweater. Marissa gently guided her behind the couch, pressing a trembling finger to her lips. Stay there. Don't come out, no matter what. Flora nodded, her big eyes swimming with fear. The knock came again, louder, sharper. "Miss Hale, we're not here to harm you," the second man said, his voice controlled, measured. "We were sent by Mr. Roland Vance. He needs to speak with you. It's important." Her stomach dropped. Roland. Her first instinct was panic, because people like Roland didn't send men in suits to buildings like hers unless something was very, very wrong. She opened the door only 2 inches, the chain lock still in place. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice cracking in both fear and defiance. The men weren't what she expected. They didn't look cruel. They didn't look impatient. If anything, they looked concerned. The older one, tall with salt and pepper hair, stepped slightly forward. "Mr. Vance asked us to deliver a message personally. He's sorry if this startled you." Startled? Her heart was practically clawing out of her chest. "Why didn't he come himself?" she asked sharply. "He wanted to, but circumstances changed after last night. He asked us to escort you to meet with him. He said it's urgent." Her hand tightened on the door. Escort. Urgent. Words that rarely meant anything good. "I'm not leaving my apartment. And I'm definitely not going anywhere with strangers." The older man nodded respectfully. "We understand. Mr. Vance said you might be afraid. That's why he told us to say this. You don't owe me anything. This is for your safety." Her chest tightened. Safety? Before she could speak, a distant crash echoed from outside the building, like a dumpster tipping over or something heavy slamming into metal. The men exchanged a glance. Not confusion, recognition. Something was happening. Something they expected. "What was that?" Marissa whispered. "We'll explain on the way, but for now, please grab your daughter. We need to leave." "No." Marissa slammed the door shut and locked every bolt. "Tell me right now what's going on or I'm calling the police." Silence. Then the older man said quietly through the door, "Miss Hale, somebody else came looking for you last night." Her blood ran cold. "What?" "A man," he continued. "He went to the bakery late. He asked questions about you, about your child, about where you live." Marissa's breath stopped. No. No. "Did he say his name?" she croaked. "No," the younger man said, "but the bakery clerk recognized him." Recognized him as who? A former employee of Mr. Vance. Someone who was fired for misconduct 2 months ago. Someone who has a history of following people home. Her entire body shivered. Her past had plenty of ghosts, but this one wasn't hers. This belonged to Roland. The men continued. "Mr. Vance didn't know about the situation until this morning. He didn't want to frighten you, but once he learned someone dangerous was trying to find you, he insisted we get you somewhere safe." Her pulse hammered in her ears. Why would that man be looking for me? "We don't know," the older man said honestly, "but he asked specifically about the woman with the little girl who was offered the strawberry chantilly cake." Flora. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. The cake had felt like a miracle. Now it felt like a target. She forced her voice to stay steady. "Where is Roland now?" "He's waiting at his West Side office, private entrance, secure building. He wants to explain things himself." Flora peeked around the couch. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Marissa opened the door fully then, sweeping Flora into her arms. "No, baby. We're not in trouble. Someone else is." She didn't say the part running through her mind, and I don't know why. They rode in a black SUV with tinted windows. Flora sat in Marissa's lap, wrapped tightly in her arms. Every few minutes, Marissa scanned the streets through the narrow gap in the window shade. They were being followed by a second car, another security vehicle. Her fear should have escalated, but instead, something strange happened. For the first time in a long time, she felt protected. She hated that she needed the feeling. She hated that Roland was the source of it. But she couldn't deny the truth. Something real was happening. Something bigger than her, bigger than her struggles. And she had no choice but to face it. When they arrived at the West Side building, Marissa expected a towering corporate fortress. Instead, the SUV stopped at a quiet two-story structure with wide windows, greenery, and soft lighting. It didn't feel like a business. It felt like a refuge. Inside, the air was warm and smelt faintly of eucalyptus. A receptionist greeted them gently and led them down a hallway to a private office. The door opened. Roland stood inside, not in a suit, not with polished executive confidence, but in rolled-up sleeves, dark circles under his eyes, and a tension in his posture that screamed he hadn't slept. He looked at Marissa first, then at Flora. His expression softened with genuine fear and relief. "You're safe. Thank God." Marissa stepped inside cautiously. "Your men said someone was looking for me." Roland nodded. "Yes." "Why?" she demanded. He inhaled slowly, rubbing his thumb across his palm, a nervous habit. "The man who followed you isn't after you specifically. He's after me." Marissa froze. "And he saw you in the bakery. He overheard my name when I paid. He knows I spoke with you. He assumed you meant something to me." Tears stung in her eyes. "But I don't know you." His voice softened. "Maybe not yet, but he doesn't know that." "But why would he come after you?" she asked, confused. "You're a businessman. What could anyone want?" He looked away. Pain, deep and old, flickered across his face. "Because I ruined him. I fired him for something he should have gone to prison for. And he wants revenge." Marissa's grip on Flora tightened. Roland met her eyes then, not as a millionaire, not as a stranger, but as a man with his own shadows. "I didn't mean to drag you into this," he whispered. "But now, I have to keep you safe." Marissa's heart pounded. Because safety meant trust. And trust was something she had buried long ago. "Why?" she whispered. "Why go this far for someone you don't even know?" Roland stepped forward, his voice barely audible. "Because last night, when I saw you and your daughter, something in me broke. Something I thought was long dead. And I can't walk away from that now." Her breath caught. She wasn't sure if she should run or stay.
Marissa didn't move. She couldn't. Roland's words hovered in the air, heavy and raw, like something torn from a place he rarely, if ever, exposed. "Something in me broke," he had said. Something about them. Her. Flora. Her instinct screamed she needed to pull back, protect herself, keep every wall standing. But the exhaustion of surviving alone, the fear of being hunted by a stranger she'd never wronged, and the quiet sincerity in Roland's voice had her trapped between opposing worlds. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about what I've lived through." Roland's jaw tightened slightly. "Then let me understand. Let me help." "You can't." Her voice cracked. "No one can." Flora shifted in her arms, rubbing her face sleepily. "Mummy, who is he?" Her innocence cut through the tension like a blade. Roland's expression softened. He crouched down slowly, lowering himself to Flora's level. His voice gentled in a way that made Marissa's heart twist. "My name is Roland. We met yesterday at the bakery. Your mom was very brave asking for help when she didn't have to." She blinked at him, curious. "Are you a good guy?" The question hit harder than a bullet. Marissa's breath hitched. Roland exhaled through his nose, then looked directly into the little girl's eyes. Not flinching, not pretending, not sugarcoating. "I'm trying to be. Some days I fail. But today I'm trying very, very hard." Flora nodded as if accepting that. As if something about him made sense even when the adults were still drowning. Marissa set her down gently. "Baby, go sit on the couch for a minute." Flora obeyed, small legs dangling off the side as she hummed to herself, oblivious to the storm building around her. Roland rose back to full height, but his eyes stayed soft. "You're in danger because of me," he said. "Why?" Marissa swallowed hard. "What did that man, the one who followed me, what did he do?" Roland paced once, hands curling into fists, fighting something inside himself before he answered. "His name is Neil Coster. He worked as a senior analyst for one of my companies, but we later discovered he was embezzling funds through layered transactions." Marissa frowned. "That sounds like a corporate mess, not a violence issue." Roland's eyes hardened. "That's not all he did." "What else?" Roland exhaled slowly, the air around him growing colder. "We found evidence he was using our client data to stalk certain women who came through our philanthropic housing programs. Women in vulnerable positions, women trying to rebuild their lives." Marissa's stomach twisted. "How many?" she whispered. "4 confirmed. Probably more." "And you fired him?" Roland nodded once. "And reported him. But his lawyer spun the evidence, made it look like we were retaliating after a dispute. The case fell apart. He walked. And when I tried to pursue it again..." "You couldn't," Marissa finished. "Because he vanished." Roland's voice dropped even lower. "Yes. Until last night." She sucked in a breath. "He showed up at the bakery, asking where you live, asking why I helped you, asking what you mean to me." Marissa felt faint. "He thinks you're someone important," Roland added. "And to a man like him, that means leverage." The word fractured something inside her. Leverage. As if she were a pawn in a game she never asked to play. Marissa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "You should have just ignored me at the bakery, given me the cake and walked out. Then none of this..." "That's not who I am," Roland cut in, his voice fierce. "And even if I wanted to pretend otherwise, I couldn't leave you there. Not after seeing what you're carrying." Marissa's throat tightened. He didn't mean her bags. He didn't mean her poverty. He meant her fear, her exhaustion, her quiet, deeply buried strength. Roland took a step closer. "Let me protect you, just until we know Neil Coster is found." She stepped back instinctively. Protection always comes with strings, and I can't afford any more strings in my life. His gaze softened slightly. "What if the only string is that you stay alive?" The room went quiet. Not heavy, but still. Like two worlds had collided and neither knew how to step away. She looked at Flora, who had fallen asleep on the couch, tiny chest rising and falling softly, a child who deserved safety, warmth, happiness, things Marissa alone had been clawing to provide since the day she took her first breath. Maybe she was tired of running, tired of being hunted by life, and now hunted by a stranger. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "This is too much. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Roland sat across from her, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Not dominating, not looming. Just present. "What do you want?" he asked softly. She laughed bitterly. "Want? People like me don't get to want. We just survive." "Then tell me what you'd choose if you didn't have to survive alone." Silence swallowed the room. Her lip trembled. "I want my daughter safe," she whispered. "That's it. That's all I ever want." "You have that," Roland said firmly. She looked at him sharply. "You can't promise that." "Maybe not perfectly," he admitted, "but I can try, and my trying is not small." His words hung between them, not boastful, not arrogant, simply true. For a moment, they just sat there breathing the same air, two strangers bound by circumstance, two lives colliding in ways neither could have predicted. Then Roland's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his face changed. Marissa's pulse spiked. "What?" Roland stood. "The security team just spotted someone outside your building." Her blood ran cold. "Is it him?" "Yes," Roland said quietly. "He's back." She clasped her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Roland stepped closer, voice steady but urgent. "You're not going home," he said. "Not until this man is caught." Her body trembled. "Then, where will we go?" Roland hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough for her to catch the flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. Then he said, "With me." Her world tilted. "My residence has full security, multiple guards, and privacy. No one will get near you there." "No," she whispered automatically, shaking her head. "No, Roland, that's too much. I barely know you." "And yet, I already made a promise to protect you. And I don't break promises." Tears welled in her eyes. She didn't want to trust him. She didn't want to feel anything. But when she looked at Flora, sleeping helplessly, unaware of the danger circling them, she knew the truth. She had no choice. "Pack what you need," Roland said quietly. "We're leaving in 20 minutes. Marissa nodded shakily, and as she stroked Flora's hair, whispering a silent apology for the life she couldn't protect her from alone, one thought echoed through her mind. "I hope I'm not making the biggest mistake of my life."
Roland's words echoed through the tiny apartment like thunder. "Pack what you need. We're leaving in 20 minutes." Marissa didn't move at first. Her mind felt stuck between fear and disbelief, and for a moment her legs wouldn't obey her. Roland watched her with a controlled intensity, calm on the outside, protecting a storm on the inside. "Marissa," he said softly but firmly, "you need to trust me now." Trust, a word she'd learned to fear. She finally nodded and slipped into the bedroom to gather her things. Roland stayed near the door,
every sense sharpened, eyes moving constantly. He wasn't just alert, he was hunting, and the prey was someone dangerous enough for even him to fear. While Marissa packed a few clothes, Roland pulled out his phone and spoke in a low, commanding voice. Team Alpha moved to grid 3. Eyes on all exits. Slow approach. If you see the suspect, do not engage without my order. A pause. Copy that. He hung up and exhaled slowly, pinching the bridge of his nose. This wasn't supposed to intersect with Narissa's life. She was the one kind of person he never wanted dragged into his world. Innocent, struggling, trying desperately to stay afloat. And now she was in danger because of him. Flora rubbed her eyes sleepily and sat up on the couch. "Where are we going, Mommy?" she murmured. Marissa knelt and brushed hair out of her daughter's face. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart." "Are we in trouble?" Flora asked. Marissa hesitated, then shook her head. "No, someone else is, and we just need to be careful for a little while." Flora nodded like it made perfect sense. Roland watched them quietly. He'd seen thousands of people in desperate circumstances, but there was something about this pair, a fragile strength, that made his chest ache in a way he didn't fully understand. When they finished packing, a single backpack with clothes and a zippered pouch of documents that held their entire existence, Marissa stood by the door. "I'm ready," she whispered. Roland nodded, stepping closer. "Stay close to me. Don't let go of Flora's hand. And if I say run, you run. Understand?" Her breath trembled. "Yes." They stepped outside. Roland kept Flora between them, Marissa clutching the child's hand tightly as they descended the dim stairwell. The building smelled of old carpet and fried food, the flickering light making the shadows dance. When they reached the parking lot, 2 black SUVs waited. Roland's security team stood nearby, communicating quietly through earpieces. A broad man in a tactical vest approached Roland. "We spotted him 2 blocks down, white sedan, windows tinted, engine running." Marissa's heart slammed against her ribs. Roland's jaw clenched. "Has he moved?" "No." "Then we leave now." He guided Marissa and Flora into the back seat of the first SUV. As soon as the doors shut, the locks clicked automatically. The sense of security should have soothed her. It didn't. As they pulled onto the main road, Marissa dared to glance behind them. Another SUV followed closely. A third took a parallel street. Roland was leaving nothing to chance. Flora leaned into her mother, staring at the tall buildings that blurred past the window. "Mommy, are we going to a fancy place?" Marissa stroked her hair. "Something like that." Roland's voice softened. "You'll both be safe there. That's what matters." Marissa kept her eyes forward. "Why are we really doing this? Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer right away. "When I saw you at the bakery, I saw someone who didn't break even after the world tried to crush her." She stiffened. "I reminded me of someone I lost." Her breath caught. "I failed her. I will not fail you." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. The city shifted around them, tall buildings giving way to clean streets, manicured trees, and high-end boutiques. It didn't feel like the same world she'd walked through that morning. Finally, the SUVs turned into a gated driveway, framed by iron bars and guarded booths. Cameras swiveled as they approached. The security officer recognized Roland instantly and waved them through. Moments later, the car rolled to a stop before an elegant building with towering windows and polished stone steps. But despite its grandeur, the place didn't feel cold. It felt safe. Marissa carried Flora as they followed Roland inside. The lobby was quiet, bathed in soft golden light. A uniformed man stepped forward. "Evening, Mr. Vance. Everything is prepared." "Good. No one gets in without my direct authorization." "Yes, sir." Inside the private elevator, Marissa couldn't stop staring at her reflection in the polished metal walls. She looked out of place. A worn sweater, scuffed shoes, stress etched into her face. Roland looked at her reflection too, but not with pity, with something closer to admiring. When the doors opened, a luxurious penthouse unfolded before them. High ceilings, soft rugs, warm lighting, bookshelves, and a view of the entire city glowing beneath them like stars. Flora gasped, "Mommy, it looks like a fairy tale." Marissa swallowed hard. It's beautiful." Roland cleared his throat. "You'll stay in the guest suite. It's down the hall. Privacy, locks, and a direct line to the security desk." He gestured gently for them to follow. The suite was larger than their entire apartment. Soft bedding, a small sitting area, and a private bathroom. A bowl of fresh fruit and pastries sat on the table. Marissa blinked. "You prepared all this?" "I had someone set it up on the way. Children need stability and snacks." Flora bolted to the fruit bowl, her eyes huge. Can I have one?" Marissa smiled despite everything. "Yes, love. Just don't eat too fast." When Flora chose a banana and curled up contentedly, Roland stepped closer to Marissa, lowering his voice. "You're safe here, I promise." She met his eyes, a storm of emotion swirling inside her. "Why me? Why help me like this?" "Because not helping you," he said softly, "would have been the one decision I'd never recover from." Her breath hitched. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then he added, "And because Flora deserves better than the world has given her so far." Her tears filled her eyes. Then suddenly, a sharp buzz sounded from Roland's phone. He looked at it. His eyes narrowed. "It's him," Roland said quietly. He just made contact again. Marissa's stomach dropped. "What does he want?" Roland's voice was steady, but his knuckles whitened around the phone. "He asked where you are." Marissa's breath shattered. He lifted his gaze, and for the first time she saw anger, not toward her, but for her. "He won't get close," Roland said, stepping nearer. "Not while I'm alive." Fear trembled through her body. But something else stirred too, something she hadn't expected. A feeling of safety, a feeling she'd almost forgotten. And as Flora curled against Marissa, half asleep with food in her hand, Marissa whispered, "Thank you." Roland didn't answer. But the way he stepped a little closer, as if placing himself between her and the entire world, said enough.
The moment Roland said, "He asked where you are," Marissa felt the entire room tilt. Her hands trembled so violently she had to grip the back of a chair just to stay upright. Every instinct told her to run, to hide Flora, to disappear before danger could reach them. Roland watched her carefully, too carefully. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Marissa, look at me." She tried. Her breath shuddered. He moved one step closer, his tone becoming firm but gentle. "You're safe here. He doesn't know where you are, and he won't get close. Not now, not ever." Marissa swallowed hard, but panic swarmed behind her eyes. "Why is he doing this?" she whispered. "Why is he looking for me? Why now?" Roland didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the window, scanning the skyline as if expecting a threat to appear between the glowing city lights. Finally, he spoke. "Because he isn't after you. He's after control." Marissa's throat tightened. "Control of what?" Roland exhaled sharply through his nose, the muscle in his jaw cracking with tension. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Before she could press him, Flora let out a small cry in her sleep, and both adults froze. The little girl curled tighter on the bed, clutching her half-eaten fruit as if afraid someone would take it. Marissa immediately rushed to her daughter's side, smoothing her tiny curls, whispering soft reassurances. Roland stood at the doorway, watching mother and child, a fragile picture painted in delicate strokes. A woman who'd endured too much. A child who deserved the world. Something shifted inside him. Something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Responsibility. Fury. And an overwhelming desire to protect them at all costs. He stepped deeper into the room. "Marissa, I need to tell you something, and before I do, I want your word that you won't panic." She stiffened. "That's not a good way to begin a sentence," she whispered. He hesitated, then nodded. "Fair enough." She sat beside Flora, bracing herself. "What is it?" Roland leaned against the dresser, arms crossed, studying her carefully. "That man, the one watching you, the one who followed you home yesterday, he isn't just anyone." Marissa's heart hammered. "What do you mean?" Roland took a breath. "He used to work for me." The words nearly knocked the breath out of her. "Work for you?" she whispered. "As what?" Roland's eyes burned with something dark. "Security." Marissa's pulse spiked. "But why would a security guard go after me? I'm nobody. I don't have anything. I don't know anything." "That's exactly why," Roland murmured. He stepped closer, voice low and controlled. "He knows I'd never tolerate someone like him threatening a woman or child, and he knows the one way to get to me is through innocence." Marissa shook her head in disbelief. "He's using us to get to you?" Roland nodded. "And now that I've moved you here, he knows you matter." Marissa's whole body felt like ice. Roland continued. "He's already broken contract. He's stolen equipment, and he's been following me too. But he became obsessed with watching who I helped, who I noticed." His eyes met hers. "And the moment I defended you at the bakery, you became his target." Marissa felt sick. "So, this is my fault?" she whispered, voice cracking. Roland snapped forward. "No," he said sharply. "Don't ever say that again." She flinched. "You didn't choose this. He did. And I will not let him hurt you or Flora. I promise you that." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried desperately to blink away. All her life she had heard promises. Some broken, some empty. But this one felt different. "Why are you helping us?" she whispered again. "Really helping us." Roland's throat bobbed. He walked toward the window, staring out at the city below with a heaviness she hadn't seen in him before. "When I was young, my mother used to volunteer at shelters. She'd bring me with her even when I hated it. She taught me that wealth means nothing if you can't use it to lift someone else up. On her last day alive, she grabbed my hand and said, 'Promise me you'll never turn your back on someone who needs you, even if the world tells you to walk away.'" Marissa's breath stilled. Roland turned back to her. "When I saw you in that bakery, hungry, exhausted, holding on to your dignity by a thread, I remembered her. I swore I wouldn't fail someone like her again." Marissa covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks, not of fear, but of something gentler. Understanding. Gratitude. Hope. Roland approached slowly, as if afraid she might break. "You're not alone," he said softly. "Not anymore." For a few minutes the room was still. Flora breathed gently in her sleep. Marissa's tears glistened in the warm light. Roland stood like a silent guardian, unwavering. But the peace shattered when one of Roland's security agents burst into the penthouse. "Sir, sorry, but we need you, immediately." Roland straightened. "What happened?" The agent glanced at Marissa and Flora before answering. "He found the building." Marissa gasped. Roland's expression hardened into steel. "How close?" The agent swallowed.
close enough to see the entrance. Roland strode toward the door, but Marissa grabbed his sleeve. "No, wait!" He turned. Her voice cracked. "Please don't go down there alone." Her face softened. "I'm not alone." He lifted his watch. It flickered, revealing multiple live camera feeds of the building perimeter. Dozens of guards, vehicles blocking exits, snipers on standby. Marissa exhaled shakily. Roland stepped closer, his hand gently brushing her shoulder. "You stay here with Flora. I need to confront him. This ends tonight." She choked back a sob. "Please don't get hurt." He held her gaze for a long moment. "I won't," he said. "I have something worth coming back to now." Her cheeks flushed. He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "And Marissa," she looked up, "when this is over, we talk. About everything." Her heart clenched. Roland nodded once to his security agent and strode out, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud that echoed through the penthouse. Marissa stared at the door long after he was gone. Her world, once defined by empty cupboards, worn shoes, and sleepless nights, had been turned upside down. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel like it was falling apart. It felt like it was changing. Like something enormous was waiting on the other side of this danger. Something that might rewrite her story forever.
The night outside Roland's penthouse had thickened into a curtain of ink, heavy and unmoving, as though the city itself held its breath. From high above, the lights below shimmered like fallen stars. But none of that mattered, not to Marissa, who stood frozen beside the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself as she tried not to crumble under fear. Roland was out there, and the man who had ruined everything before, who had watched her, followed her, stalked her, was now close enough to taste the air she breathed. The apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Flora stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, why are you scared?" Marissa dropped to her knees immediately, pulling her daughter into her arms. "I'm not scared, sweetheart. I'm right here. Mommy's right here." But Flora was perceptive, far more than a child her age should be. Her small fingers touched Marissa's cheek. "You're crying." Marissa closed her eyes, trying to steady her voice. "Sometimes mommies cry just because they love their kids so much." Flora frowned in that serious way she had. "Then I love you too much too." Despite the fear pressing against her ribs, Marissa smiled. Flora always managed to be the light in every darkness. But outside, she looked toward the door. Roland was facing something dangerous, something twisted and obsessed, something that had uprooted her life once and was threatening to again. And he was facing it because of her, because he believed in protecting her. A knock sounded from the hallway. Marissa jerked upright, heart thrashing. But it was only one of Roland's guards, a tall, barrel-chested man with a calm but alert expression. "Miss Hale, Mr. Vance asked us to keep you and your daughter inside. You're safe here." "What's happening?" she asked, voice trembling. "Your stalker approached the perimeter. He's been confronted." Marissa swallowed thickly. "Is Roland—" "He's fine. He knows what he's doing." But that didn't calm her. Roland had become more than a protector. He'd become a lifeline she never expected, a force she had begun to trust in a way she had once thought impossible. And she couldn't lose him. Not now. She lifted Flora into her arms and sat on the edge of the bed, willing herself to breathe. Downstairs, in the dimly lit courtyard of the building, Roland stood face to face with the man who had turned Marissa's life into a nightmare. Caleb Devereaux. A former security agent with skill, intelligence, and something fractured inside him that had twisted into obsession. Roland's security team formed a tight arc behind him, weapons holstered but ready, eyes sharp. Caleb stood in the center of the entrance path, his posture relaxed, his smile disturbingly calm. You always did show up when someone needed saving, Caleb drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. How noble. Roland didn't blink. Step away from the building. Or what? Caleb tilted his head. You'll have your men tackle me? You'll call the police and pretend this is some simple harassment case? Roland's voice was cold steel. You crossed a line. Caleb laughed, a jagged, broken sound. I crossed many lines. You just didn't notice until she showed up. Roland's jaw tightened. Leave Marissa and her daughter alone. Caleb's eyes gleamed like shards of glass. I didn't come for them. Roland stepped forward. Then who? You! Caleb's smile widened. You made me what I am. You trained me. You told me to watch people, to find their weaknesses, and then you act shocked when I watch someone important to you? Roland's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. You followed a woman who had nothing, a child. That isn't training, that's sickness. Caleb shrugged lightly. Maybe, or maybe it's clarity. You spend years building an empire, pretending you're some kind of savior. But the moment you look at someone with actual compassion, like that pathetic bakery woman, you reveal your one weakness. Roland's fists curled. Caleb leaned in slightly. I wanted to see how far you'd go for her. And look at you. Here you are, playing hero. Roland didn't move. That's enough, he said quietly. You're done. But Caleb's smile only grew. You think you can protect them forever? Her, the little girl? They'll never be safe. Never. Every time they leave the house, I'll know. Every place they go, I'll see. Those words were a blade aimed straight at Roland's control. He lunged, not physically, but with command. He lifted a hand sharply, signaling his security team. And in one coordinated instant, Caleb was surrounded, restrained, disarmed, and dragged to the ground. But even pinned, he kept laughing. You think this ends with me? You think you can hide your little charity project forever? Roland crouched beside him, eyes blazing with fury unlike anything his team had ever seen. This ends tonight. You're a fool, he hissed. You care too much. Roland didn't answer. He didn't argue. He simply stood, nodded once to his head of security, and said, Call the police. And when he's in custody, I want him nowhere near a courtroom. Get him a psychiatric evaluation. I want him monitored every hour. Caleb screamed curses as he was dragged away, and Roland didn't watch him go. Because the moment the danger was contained, the only thing he cared about was the woman waiting for him upstairs. When he stepped back into the penthouse, Marissa was pacing, gripping her hands so tightly her knuckles were white. The moment she saw him, alive, unharmed, her knees buckled. Roland rushed forward and caught her before she collapsed. It's over, he whispered. She clutched his shirt, shaking for relief. Is he gone? Yes, he murmured. He won't hurt you or Flora, ever. Tears streamed down her cheeks, years of fear finally cracking apart. Roland's arms wrapped around her, warm and steady. I'm so sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm sorry you had to live in fear for so long. She pressed her forehead to his chest, sobbing openly now. Thank you for saving us. Roland exhaled shakily, his own emotions bleeding through his carefully controlled exterior. You don't owe me anything, he said softly. I did it because I wanted to. Because you and Flora deserve safety. You deserve peace. She leaned back, looking up at him. Her voice trembled. What happens now? Roland brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle. Now, he said, you start living again. And I help you rebuild whatever you want your life to be. She stared at him, stunned by the sincerity in his eyes. "You mean that?" "Every word." Flora, half asleep, wandered out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. "Mr. Roland, are we safe now?" Roland scooped her into his arms without hesitation. "Yes, sweetheart, completely safe." She rested her head on his shoulder, tiny hands gripping his shirt. "Then Mommy can stop crying." Marissa let out a breathy laugh, wiping her eyes. Roland looked at her, from Flora's curls resting on his shoulder to the raw hope in his expression. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. An understanding, a beginning, a promise woven into the quiet spaces between their hearts. Marissa stepped closer, brushing her fingers against Roland's hand, hesitant at first, then firmer. He intertwined his fingers with hers. No more expired cakes, no more nights sleeping in fear, no more running from shadows. For the first time in years, Marissa felt like the world wasn't closing in. It was opening. And Roland, this man who stepped into her story by accident, had become the one place she felt safe enough to breathe. She whispered, voice soft as a prayer, "Thank you for finding us." Roland squeezed her hand. "Marissa, you weren't found." He tilted her chin up gently. "You were meant."